So thanks so much. This is actually a perfect sequence because the origin of this talk is happened almost a year ago when Cem, who you saw just on stage, and I had coffee in Berlin, had typical conversations we have, and one of the things we started tinkering with ideas. One of the ideas that we were tinkering with was if the Bauhaus had an economics class, how would it have looked like? Just the stuff we talk about, and it's like, but it's triggered like a year-long investigation into this particular question. Like, I don't know how many of you has ever taken economics classes. If you did, you realize it's very, very far away from what you usually do in a design school. So how can we bring those two things together? So this is basically not only putting design into mechanism design, but also how to Bauhausify a conceptual understanding of economics. This is what I want to talk about today. But before that, a little bit of a motivational background story, the story of Armando Ortega-Reichert. Armando was a graduate student at Stanford in the 1960s. This is his dissertation in industrial engineering. He wrote about competitive bidding under uncertainty. The under uncertainty was his main contribution. Armando filed his dissertation, did not publish it because he didn't have the fees, couldn't pay the fees. Went back to his native Mexico, became a civil servant, had a distinguished career in the Mexican civil service, retired a couple of years ago, is now in his 80s. Would have completely faded into obscurity if not for the little fact that these six guys cited his dissertation in their papers, which got them eventually to the Nobel Prize. Some from Stanford, some from somewhere else. Two guys over here, mechanism designers, Al Roth, market designers, Paul Milgram, Robert Wilson, who was on his dissertation committee in auction design. Now, especially auction design has become a $1 trillion industry, all of these things. All of these guys are very, very wealthy, designing auctions, other economic mechanisms, markets, matching markets, all these things. So Stanford should at least name a building after Armando, in my opinion. So, even if design has become a professional success story for economics, it never really translated into teaching economics. It moved a little bit over from old school tradition economics to game theory, mechanism design, causal inference. All of this stuff is much more structured, but there's still a massive gap between what we think about like design, how do you teach design versus how do you teach economics. So we're trying to bridge that gap. From our own perspective, our problems always like if things go wrong in the economic space, also in the Web3 space, some of the stuff is intentionally scammy. Some of the stuff is just poorly encoded that it gets scammed. But the massive gap in between still is that a lot of stuff is poorly conceptualized, poorly communicated, so the promise it was started out with was never really delivered. So this is really the problem we want to solve for ourselves. We want to train our people, our community, in expressing economic ideas in a very intuitive and practical, conceptual fashion. So this triggered a deep dive. Many group conversations too with Eric and Jem and Vasim and Beth too over last year. I'll present 5+1 of those deep dives very quickly, just as a teaser, because I think we're at the point where we can actually take this out from the research phase over to the experimental phase. The first one, the obvious one, is the Bauhaus, especially the so-called Bauhaus 4 course. The first preliminary course all of the Bauhaus students had to take before they moved on to their specializations, what is it, metal, glass, clay, wood, and so on, until they were allowed to build buildings. The curious fact we learned about the Bauhaus 4 course was that over time, from the beginning, the three main instructors, they're well-known artists in their own right, moved from the spiritual and philosophical under Johannes Itten towards the more materialistic under Joseph Albers for the very simple reason that in order to survive, the Bauhaus had to find ways to make money. So interesting thing. Another one, I think that's the one that should be most familiar to all of you, is the Bloomington School with Eleanor and Vincent Ostrom. The people who really started the governing the commons movement. She's actually the co-Nobel laureate of my own dissertation advisor, Oliver Williamson. But the interesting thing here, why we found this interesting for our case, is that the whole, all of her work was really, really focused on actually creating practical design principles, which is something you very, very rarely ever find in any economics curriculum. So she was very far out from mainstream economics at the time, to the extent that almost nobody knew about her when she got the Nobel Prize. The third one is like very close to my own heart. This is Herbert Simon and the Carnegie School at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh. This is really the epicenter of computational economics. A lot of famous people, I think 8 Nobel laureates, 5 Turing Awards, 6 or 7 John von Neumann prizes, and so on. This is very the nexus, especially Herb Simon himself. I think he founded the business school, the economics department, the computer science school, and the design school when he was there. So like all of the things we are interested combined in one person. Number 4 is the one I already mentioned. This is the Stanford economic engineering approach. Mentioned a couple names. Another one is Ken Arrow that should be mentioned. The interesting thing, as a side note for us, why we find this interesting is almost nothing of this stuff I talked about came out of the economics department. It came from industry engineering. It came from the economic engineering systems school and the operations research group at the business school. So number 5 is the one I want to do a little bit more of a deep dive here. Everything else is just sadly on the teaser level. But from Berkeley, Christopher Alexander's pattern language, which you might or might not know, he's an architect, so he originally started out as a way to express architectural ideas succinctly and intuitively. It's become much more successful in software development as software design patterns. So might be some people that know about this. So like this has already been proven. And we find it very interesting, but before I go a deep dive, the last one, the bonus inspiration is Brian Eno and Peter Schmidt's oblique strategies for a very, very simple reason. I love the format, having succinct creativity triggers on a set of cards, which I think we'll employ for our things too. So this is overall the span of inspirations, antecedents. We want to bring together from one end to the other, from the oblique strategies over to the Stanford approach, to actually put together into one curriculum that actually teaches economic ideas, economic concepts in a more rigorous design fashion. Go back to Christopher Alexander. His definition of a pattern: a careful description of perennial solution to recurring problem. The interesting stuff here is, in my opinion, the last sentence that brings life to a building. I think one of our big goals is always to create economic spaces that are inhabitable, that people like to inhabit and dwell in and live in and voluntarily, not being forced, which a lot of economics is about forcing people into lock-in or lock-out. This is stuff we want to avoid, and very clearly. And in the fine print down here, you can use the solution a million times over without ever doing it the same way twice. So we condense it to a little bit more shorter definition of itself. The pattern is a succinct, axiomatic, nearly self-explanatory, memorable abstraction of a best design practice. Thank you. So this deliberately moves away from the formalistic way of teaching economics, going away from the mathematical, but it should ultimately connect with the mathematical part of economic construction, but ideally like the Bauhaus 4 course, before you take a formal economic class, you get a very clear conceptual understanding of what you can do with economic ideas. So this started a year ago, a couple of conversations, a lot of research, a couple hundred papers and books. I think we have roughly 1 semester's worth of design patterns identified. Usually a pattern should have a succinct explanation, should not be, the explanation itself, we'll see it in a second, should not be self-explanatory, but should be able to convey the idea and the intuition within 20 minutes. This is also Christopher Alexander's idea. We have a tentative structure of how those patterns relate to each other, how they relate to more traditional economic ideas, and I think we're at the point where we can publish them in serial form. And I just registered the domain econpatterns.com yesterday, so this is probably going to be the starting point. In terms of trying to come up with a structure, we try to do it in 2 layers. The first layer is what we call the engine room. This is economic engines, this is allocation mechanisms, this is governance mechanisms, the famous ones, of course, market auctions, votes, elections, matching mechanisms, action algorithms, scheduling algorithms. Most of this comes from industry engineering, not really from economics, but other things like filters, selection filters, tournaments, load balancing, network flow, all of these things really belong on this layer. But we want to go, and one of the things is called, you want to be able to put certain governance structures together from these constituent parts. But we also want to go 1 layer down. We want to understand the actions, the motivations, the conflicts between options, the orders, confluences, structures, habitats, economic architectures, and try to find out like how we actually put things together in order to create such a so-called economic engine. So, so far for this, I'll run through some of the teasers on this oblique strategy level. So I'll just give you the headline. So see if it's intuitive by itself, or if it requires more of an explanation. The first one is really the fundamental pattern of a decentralized system, which is basically the opposite of a single source of truth. It's a single truth, gaining a single truth within a community without having a single source of truth. This would be a type of an order, a process, a step of actions I've done many times with the startups I work with is map, reduce, sort, and filter, which you probably know out of computer science, not really out of economics, but always you start with a big number of things and you want to filter them down to a small number of things. This is usually the steps you go through. This is very much simply structuring your own workflow in that way. Another one would be an economic habitat. The obvious economic habitat is, of course, a market. And that's here, a market is just an intersection with a lot and a fence. On an intersection itself, a lot, fence, they're all individual structures. And if you look at like an ancient Greek agora, if you look at a supermarket, or if you look at an online market platform, they all have this very abstract structure. So you'll find these things in all of these. This is an idea, getting down to abstract constituents to bigger things. And then we collect a lot of really meaningful quotes. I offer you 2 of those. One of them, Herb Simon was asked, what are his 2 most important things in his work? He said the system and the tree structure to find a way through the overall system. Another one, this would be a structure. Another one is another famous quote from Joseph Schumpeter, the forefather of entrepreneurial economics. He said, like, the fundamental problem of an entrepreneur is he has to do 2 things, 2 divergent things. One of them is carry out new combinations, be creative, and get things done, be organized. So, as I said, we're ready to bring this to the public. Will be announcement. We'll be going to have an event at Curve Labs probably next month. Econ Patterns is already online. There's not much on it yet, but we'll bring more information about all of these inspirations, first of the patterns, and more explanations out there. Please reach out to us, and I hope you found this interesting. Thank you.